NCDC confirms 595 new cases of COVID-19 as PTF announces new method of contacting coronavirus.
Over the past few weeks, increasing evidence has emerged that in addition to droplet infection, we cannot rule out that airborne transmission is.
Senate moves to ensure food security, set to establish Agri Development Fund.
Nigeria presents second voluntary national review on implementation of SDGs. Turn high-level political forum.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall discuss anti-corruption and the judicial system.
It's a well-known fact that corruption has become a serious challenge to governance and development in Africa, including Nigeria. Hence, the efforts being made by the member states to change the narrative. Kinsley.
Yeah, that's right. Towards this end, the heads of state and governments of the African Union adopted a convention on preventing and combating corruption with a view to having a common position to advance the fight in their respective nations.
And this determination compelled African leaders to set aside 11th of July every year to mark Anti-Corruption Day to review progress made so far in the fight and further drum support from various stakeholders towards achieving results.
And this year's day, which was marked a few days ago amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, had as its theme fighting corruption through effective and efficient judicial systems.
Now, key players in the Anti-Corruption Crusade believe that judiciary plays a key role in the fight against corruption and other-related offences.
In a special message to mark the 4th Africa Anti-Corruption Day, President Muhammadu Buhari urged African leaders to ensure the immediate actualization of the common position on assets recovery.
The question on the lips of many Nigerians are how it would effective and efficient judicial system promote anti-corruption crusade in Nigeria. What are the challenges being faced by the judicial system in promoting anti-corruption crusade? What strategies should be employed to recover our looted assets?
Very pertinent questions you have raised there by Jumai. Indeed, what is the role of major stakeholders, as it were, in the fight against corruption? And what kind of collaboration is needed between the justice system and the anti-corruption agencies? These are some of the issues we intend to raise with our guests this morning. Good Morning Nigeria. I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I welcome you to the program.
And I am Juma Yusuf. Thanks for joining us. We're reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, the NTA, and from the nation's capital, Abuja. We have our complimentary segment of the program. But first, let's join Ifoma Ojinta for the morning news. Good morning, Ifoma.
Good morning, Jumai and Kingsley, and here is the morning news. The NCDC has confirmed 595 new cases of COVID-19 as at 13th of July 2020. The new cases recorded from 20 states indicates that Lagos has 156, followed by Oyo with 141. FCT has 99 cases, Edo 47. Kaduna State has 27 new cases, Ondo State 22, Rivers 20 and Osun State 17. Others include Imo has 13 new cases, Plateau has 10, Nasarawa and Anambra states have 8 each. Kano, Benue and Borno reports 5 each. Ogun has 4. Taraba and Gombe states have 3 each. Kebbi 1 and Cross River also has 1 new case. So far, Nigeria has 33,153 confirmed cases of COVID-19, with 13,671 of them discharged, while 744 patients died of the virus. Meanwhile, latest research findings about the novel coronavirus by the World Health Organization indicates that the disease can be airborne in addition to transmission through droplets. This latest discovery was communicated by the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 at Monday's briefing in Abuja.
Over the past few weeks, increasing evidence has emerged that in addition to droplet infection, we cannot rule out that airborne transmission is also possible as a mode of transmission of COVID-19. It means that staying together in closed spaces, in clusters, such as in restaurants or a small room with very poor ventilation, increases the risk of transmission.
And to other news now, a legislation towards establishing a fund for sustainable financing of Nigeria's agricultural sector and ensuring food security is in progress in the Senate. The bills for the establishment of the National Agriculture Development Fund and National Food Reserve Agency have been presented to members of the public who described it as well-timed.
Very important for the growth, development, and promotion of agriculture. The National Food Reserve Agency bill is particularly significant at this time.
Chief of Defense Staff General Abayomi Olonishakin is meeting troops on the front line of the fight against banditry in the northwest to boost their morale to succeed in the renewed internal security operations.
From what I have seen here today at this super camp, there is no doubt in my mind that the scourge of banditry will soon be a thing of the past, and all law-abiding citizens will be able to resume their normal lives.
Minister of Education Adamu has inaugurated governing councils of 13 federal universities with a caution that due process, abiding by government's rule and transparency in selecting principal officers are adhered to at all times. The minister noted that avoiding selfish and unpatriotic behaviors and forming a harmonious working relationship with the management will enhance efficiency and address issues like admission racketeering, examination malpractices, immoral attitudes among both students and lecturers.
And development of these institutions without recourse to interference or what we here call micromanagement in their day-to-day running.
Nigeria has presented her second voluntary national review on the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals to the United Nations High-Level Political Forum. The Senior Special Assistant to the President on SDGs, Princess Adejoke Orelope Adefulire, said the context of Nigeria's presentation is on 7 areas of priorities.
The 2020 Voluntary National Review on Sustainable Development Goals focuses on key issues of poverty, inclusive economy, health and well-being, gender equality, enabling environment, peace and security, and partnership for the goals.
I'm talking politics now. All Progressives Congress has assured all governorship aspirants on the party's platform in Ondo states of transparent re-election activities that will prevent the party from litigation. Secretary Caretaker and Extraordinary Convention Committee of APC, Senator John Akpan, reaffirmed this while presenting the report of the governorship screening to the Appeal Committee at the party's National Secretariat.
Whatever judgment has been given by the screening committee, giving someone an opportunity of a second chance, we have to do everything possible to make sure we don't have what happened in states like Bayelsa and other states that we lost. The loss is very painful. We are yet to recover.
And that's the morning news. The program continues with Kingsley and Jumai after this break.
coronavirus spread is when infected people sneeze and cough. Small droplets of fluid expelled by cough or sneezes are laced with viruses looking for new respiratory tracts to infect. When a sick person sneezes around someone who is healthy, the virus can land in the nose, mouth, or even the eyes, causing an infection. Symptoms can include fever, cough, shortness of breath. Symptoms may appear within 2 to 14 days. Seek medical advice if you develop symptoms and have been in close contact with a person known to have COVID-19, or if you live or have recently been in an area with ongoing spread of COVID-19. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest television network. In this time of despair, our country, Nigeria, needs us now more than ever. We stand a chance to save our great country, Nigeria. A chance to rise up from this pandemic stronger and better. What will be the gain if we do not learn from other countries and observe the lockdown to stop the further spread of the virus? If we loosen our guards and allow this virus doom our very existence, then what have we gained? This is the call to every Nigerian to unite as one and stop the spread of this deadly virus. Stay at home and stay safe. Remember, the virus doesn't move unless we move. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest television network. Nigerians, let us take responsibility. Stay healthy, stay safe, and curb the spread of the virus. Take responsibility. The coronavirus spreads from one person to another. Let us avoid crowd gathering of any kind for any reason. Take responsibility. Avoid traveling from one state to another during these lockdown restrictions. Obey all the rules that are put in place. Take responsibility. Stop spreading fake news and unverified reports about the coronavirus. There is no known cure for COVID-19. Take responsibility. Observe all the measures that can help stop the spread of the virus. Together, we can do this, but only if we take responsibility. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest television network.
Well, thank you so much for rejoining us. This is Good Morning Nigeria. Development experts enjoin Nigeria to maximize opportunities created by COVID-19. Let's join Kunle Ade for details.
Since coronavirus became a global health challenge, restrictions on movements globally have halted business activities. The situation has been characterized by job losses. Economic managers are, however, coming up with strategies to respond to challenges occasioned by the pandemic. A development economist, Dr. Emeka Okengu, said African countries, especially Nigeria, should resort to effective management of natural resources.
Where people see a lot of disadvantages in the COVID pandemic, I see numerous, countless opportunities, that we can explore, because a lot of the requirements, to maybe return the global economy back into shape, it will be predicated on organic products that will be coming, from places like Africa. Agriculture, agro-allied services is a very, very major way to go. Okay, the mining industry is another very major way to go.
And the equities market on Monday, July 13, 2020 closed on a negative note as Nigeria's stock exchange or share index depreciated by minus 0.44% to close at 24,200.60 basis points as against plus 0.12% appreciation recorded previously. With business news, I'm Kunle Adeyeye.
That was our business package on Good Morning Nigeria today. Coming up next is Newspaper Review.
Newspaper reviewer Bayo Cheobi is in the studio. Good morning, Bayo.
Thank you, Juma. Good morning.
Hope you enjoyed the rain.
Yes, it's very refreshing. Good morning, Kinsley. Luckily,
Kinsley said he didn't like it.
It's not too heavy in Abuja and occasioning so much flood as it is around the country.
Wow.
That's right. But, you know, this is not the peak of the flooding season yet.
Yes. It's already flooding elsewhere.
Yes, it is, but more is coming, and more is coming. We understand about 102 local government areas in 28 states of the Federation will be heavily impacted by flood this year. The Hydrological Services Agency, NEMA, and of course NIMET that has the weather forecast. Those agencies have already sent out the various warning alerts to the states. It's now up to the states to pick it up from there, right, so that they have the appropriate responses.
Yes.
Yes. We had that as a conversation some week or two ago.
That is the appropriate warning. And the next measure is to be forearmed against it.
Exactly. Absolutely, Bayo.
So, Bayo, we'll start with the Daily Sun newspaper, the airpiece by the Daily Sun. COVID-19 infected health workers hit 128 in Kwara, Bayelsa, with a rider federal government to open testing centers in all 774 local government areas. And the bold headlines there from the Daily Sun newspaper: fire guts World Trade Center in Abuja. Security seals Magu's office. With a rider withdraws official bulletproof SUVs. Panel demands proof of spending on staff foreign training. Why I can't release suspended EFCC chair. That's coming from the Inspector General of Police. Kaduna pastor dismisses link with him. You find all these stories on page 8. And the picture story there: smoke billows out of the World Trade Center in Abuja. This happened recently. De-radicalized repentant Boko Haram members who have learned new skills at Malam Sidi Camp, Gombe State yesterday. You can see the picture of the repentant Boko Haram members and others displaying their newly learned skills. COVID-19, federal government rejigs airport's protocol with a rider reduces passengers' arrival time from 3 to 1 hour 30 minutes before flights. You find that story on page 2. Gunmen kill senator, police officer in Taraba. Gunmen kidnap senator, police officer in Taraba. Find that story on page 5. Reps grill NDDC boss over 90.4 billion extra budgetary expenditure. 150 abandoned projects. You find that story all on page 7, with a rider commissions officials snub Senate panel. And interstate trip, Rivers government insists on 14 days isolation for visitors. You find that story on page 6. And federal government bans maize importation. You find that on page 2.
We're still importing maize?
That's
or derivatives of maize.
I'm quite surprised.
Maybe corn syrup.
Foreign exchange will not be available for importation of maize.
Nobody should be amazed in the first instance that
we're importing maize.
Importing maize. I mean, that's to say, the story will provide the detail. Is it corn syrup? That's to say, are they derivatives of maize, or the corn that anybody can plant around his or her premises at this time of year, and you harvest it under 90 days, I believe?
Actually, Nigerian farmers have been protesting, and that is predicated on the information that some brand of maize were being imported for animal feeds. And that now, since the forest is not going to be available, it means that that will have to stop. They will have to find alternative.
Yeah, that's part of what we are. These are the leakages in the forest system, and if a stop is being put to the importation or the utilization of forest for that, it's truly heartwarming. Maize is a crop that can be cultivated year-round. I mean, in Abuja here, virtually all through the year, you'll find those who hawk maize. Although this is their boom season, you'll find them January, February, March, November, those dry months ordinarily, you'll find them.
It is almost all year round now.
That's
Even
right.
during dry season, it is available.
Absolutely.
It's become an afternoon delicacy.
Yes,
all
absolutely.
over across.
So why would anybody be, you can cultivate hectares upon hectares of maize. It's a wise decision to stop that importation. Let's take a look at just some of the stories on the front page of the Punch, and then you can come in with your comments. Says CBN places serial loan defaulters on watch list. That's about the nameplate. Another headline there. NFIU submits report on Mago's forest transactions to panel. Details on page 8. Nigerian and foreign academics and others celebrate showing card 86. Lead story. School reopening confusion. That's the kicker. Ministry lists guidelines, omits resumption date. And federal government says COVID-19 won't go away soon. Rules out financial help for private schools. Southwest states hold virtual meeting today. Take stand on pupils' resumption. And the story earlier read by Jumai, the photographs are also there of de-radicalized and repentant Boko Haram militants at an orientation program in Gombe State yesterday. Emir deposed by late Bayero, reappointed Kano monarch. That's page 7. And gunmen kidnap ex-National Assembly member and police imam in Taraba. Community accuses Adamawa deputy governor of shielding communal clash mastermind. How kidnapped Kingpin Wadume was rearrested after Balarabe's troops aided escape. That's according to a witness in the ongoing trial. Details on page 7. Boko Haram demands 20 million naira to free blind IDP's daughter and niece. APC governors and leaders meet today and plan funding for Edo and the Ondo polls. That's on page 2 in greater detail. Bio.
Well, let's bring in some clarification. The Minister of Education says that the 104 unity schools that will not open has nothing to do with the state government, because that decision is not binding on state governments. However, the Minister of State for Education provided some clarifications. And during the daily briefing of the Presidential Task Force, he said that, meanwhile, there are plans now providing guidelines about safety in reopening schools, and therefore requirements that cover areas of health requirements and other measures that has to be put in place for health safety have been provided by the Federal Ministry of Education, and it was jointly provided with the Federal Ministry of Environment, Federal Ministry of Health, as well as safety experts on resumption of schools. The plan focuses on attendance, social distancing, hygiene, cleaning, and other non-pharmaceutical statements. And that's what the paper is reporting, that they have provided guidelines for reopening of schools, but no date has been named for reopening of schools. Yes.
Yeah, I think the contentious issue is less now with the reopening of schools than with the senior certificate examination. That's what we normally refer to as WASC. That is the issue. That is the one that is on the table. And as a number of stakeholders have said, schools don't need to reopen before that exam takes place. And WAEC had already given its indication that the exams will run from sometime on the 4th of August or so to sometime in September. Does that stand? And the federal government had said through the Minister of Education that federal government unity school pupils might not participate in that exam. Is that still the situation? Those are the answers.
It's confusing, but yes, don't forget that the West African Examination Council is a 5-country regional body. So if Nigeria is opting out, particularly the unity schools, not to participate, there's every likelihood that Ghana, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Gambia will go ahead with the West African Examination Council, because they were all part of the regional body that agreed on those specific dates. The challenge for us is that our own students who will not partake in it will miss from that regional examination body. But however, we still have our own Nigeria Examination Council, NECO, yes, which subsequently probably will take care of it. But the critical issue is that the premier FASI qualification required for admission this year is going to be a challenge. The other area is that the Presidential Task Force had advised that Nigerians must come out and get tested. The more we get tested, the earlier we are able to track the prevalence of the COVID-19. And in this regard, the Presidential Task Force has indicated that testing centers are going to be provided for all the 774 local government areas. So that will bring testing closer to the people. And the more you test, the more you will be able to isolate the pandemic. Meanwhile, statistics show that yesterday we had 595 cases in 20 states. Already our total is 33,153. We have registered 744 deaths. So far, 11,738 of our compatriots are being treated for COVID-19. Cross River had 10 cases, has had 10 cases, 3 discharged, and 1 death so far. There's positive development. Officers of the Federal Ministry of Health have been to Cross River, and there has been cooperation, and synergy has been established as far as working together is concerned. Meanwhile, across the world, Washington, D.C. yesterday recorded the 4th consecutive day when there was no death registered in that city. New York has its own first day, no death registered. And for us here now, we should be looking forward to 14 consecutive days when the COVID-19 cases are dropping. That is when we'll be able to confirm that we are beginning to bend the curve and contend with the pandemic.
Well, I think it's...
The other story is kidnapping that is coming up again in Taraba State. There are 2 cases reported now. One is a former senator who was a senator in 2003 to 2007. He was picked up by kidnappers in his home in Karim Lamido local government area. The other one is a police officer who acts as a chief imam for the command. He was picked in Jalingo from his home. Before Wadume was arrested, kidnapping in Taraba, particularly in Jalingo, was very alarming. Civil servants were being picked from their homes. Any prominent businessman was also in danger. But it went, a lull came with the advent of the arrest of Wadumi and all his gang. But now it seems to be coming up on the upsurge.
So are these the remnants of the Wadumi gang, or these are freelance kidnappers, as it were? Well, and it's for the security agencies to unravel.
It's a challenge for the security to be able to need that. There is an amendment to reporting time for flights, especially domestic flight. You don't have to go to the airport 3 hours now, but at least for 1 hour 30 minutes. The Minister of Aviation provided clarification that test run at Kano and Lagos Airport had indicated that 90 minutes will be sufficient for you to for waiting time to get checked in. However, when international flights begin, we will resort to the same 3 hours.
Well, that probably will be because of low passenger factor at the moment. If it's a peak season, the holiday season, and you get to the airport, you say you want to get to the airport an hour and a half before then, you might have to struggle with getting a seat on the flight. That's assuming the flight doesn't take off by the time you are still going through the procedures. First time, advise yourself to be there in good time.
Passengers have been advised to, to check in online, actually. Let's now go quickly to the editorial, and it's coming from the Nigerian Pilot. It's talking about public safety at a time of pandemic. I'm just going to read a little. While we commend and salute the efforts and sacrifice of the armed forces of Nigeria and other pro-peace actors in putting their lives on the line in order to secure the nation's territorial integrity, lives and properties, it is our considered opinion that there is a need to review the security strategies of government for fresh ideas.
Yes. Before I deal to the editorial, let me quickly add that the World Trade Center, that people saw smoke bellowing from it, that had been put off. The internal fire system, in fact, put it off, and the owners of the property says that there's no cause for alarm because people were worried that the highest building yesterday was bellowing with smoke from Abuja. That has been taken care of. And the editorial now is from
the Federal Fire Service was also there.
Yes, everybody was there. But it must be emphasized that they have a very good internal fire system, and that was able to help take care of the fire. And the owners say the fire was not serious. But now the editorial is from the Pilot, and it's again happened on the same thing we've been talking about, public safety during this pandemic. Apparently, it's emphasizing the fact that because of the pandemic, we now have to deal with the dual challenge of increase in security attacks and challenges, kidnapping, armed robbery, and banditry. And their editorial is saying that if we have tried strategies and it's not working, there's need to change strategy and change guards. And therefore, governments should also look at the causes of this high criminality rather than treating the symptoms. And apparently it is appearing as if the military action is not working out. So we should go to the roots and treat the causes of the criminality from their roots.
Okay, Baya Toebe, we'd like to thank you as always for being around. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Thank you for having me.
It's Good Morning Nigeria live on NTA's network service. We're taking a short break now. When we return, it's time for our conversation segment.
The coronavirus, also known as COVID-19, is spreading at an alarming rate all over the globe, including Nigeria. With the number of infected persons in Nigeria increasing daily, prevention is better than cure. Coronavirus has no cure. The virus spreads from one person who affects two persons, and by the time the affected person is isolated, the two persons have affected four, and it keeps spreading. You must take preventive measures to save yourself and that of the people around you. Always wash your hands with soap and water. Put distance between yourself and others. Whenever you cough or sneeze, cover your mouth. Clean and disinfect surfaces. Stay at home if you're sick and contact the proper authorities. Together, we can cut down the spread of the coronavirus. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest TV network.
Welcome there. Have you washed your hands?
Inside my house again. This thing not the key black man.
I don't know if it's misinformation or poor hygiene that will kill you first. Coronavirus is real, and good hygiene practice will save your life. Anyway, no hand washing, no eating.
I will not take care of it. That's what I parents. Coronavirus is real and it's on the rise. But you can help yourself and help others to be safe. Remember, we can stop the spread. It's in your hands.
This message is from the Akinfade Foundation in partnership with the National Orientation Agency with support from MacArthur Foundation.
Close Up Deep Action with antibacterial formula and deep cleaning gel keeps your teeth clean and protected. Close Up Deep Action. Enjoy long-lasting fresh breath and more.
Coronavirus is real. Steps to avoid this pandemic. Wash your hands regularly or sanitize your hands. Keep social and physical distancing. Avoid crowded places. Stay at home unless absolutely necessary. Don't touch your eyes, nose, or mouth if your hands are not clean. Avoid the spread of coronavirus. Coronavirus is real.
Nigerians, coronavirus is dangerous. It can kill. When you see this sign, high fever, cough, shortness of breath, drowsiness, pneumonia, don't panic, don't hide, don't embark in self-medication. Promptly visit the nearest medical facility. Report all cases to the nearest hospital. Prevention is key. Avoid contact with infected persons. Avoid crowded areas as much as possible. Wash your hands regularly. Use hand sanitizers. Your life is precious. Stay alive. Live long, live right. This message is sponsored by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture and the Nigerian Film Corporation. Nigerian Film Corporation, powering possibility.
Thanks for joining us. The Anti-Corruption Crusade is a task that must be carried out with the support of some critical stakeholders to achieve the desired results. Abdusalami Jibrin put together this report to serve as a backgrounder for our discussion.
Corruption has been a bane to Africa's development, Nigeria inclusive. As such, the war against corruption has been a key policy of the Muhammadu Buhari administration, which has been yielding positive results so far. However, the anti-corruption war cannot be won without the pivotal role of the judiciary. For the judiciary to promote the war against corruption, It must be independent as well as efficient and effective in the dispensation of justice, thereby sustaining people's trust and confidence. Recognizing this, while commemorating the 4th African Anti-Corruption Day with the theme Fighting Corruption Through Effective and Efficient Judicial Systems, stakeholders maintain that the judiciary is key to the fight against corruption and should at all times demonstrate its independence and neutrality. Corruption, they insist, can never end with an ineffective, partial judiciary.
Systemic corruption has weakened all of us, not just anti-corruption agencies. It's also weakened the judiciary as well. So if we work together, we can remove that disability in order to strengthen ourselves.
Of course, obstacles that have been mentioned, especially from the bench, is the fact that they are confronted with improper investigation, rush to prosecution, and then lack of skill on the part of the prosecutors and investigators.
In a message to mark the day, President Buhari urges African leaders to ensure the immediate actualization of the common African position on assets recovery. The president laments that the massive corruption being perpetrated across our national governments has created a huge governance deficit that has in turn created negative consequences. With the judiciary facing a myriad of challenges, ranging from perceived corrupt practices by judicial officers, interference by politicians, and the slow adjudicatory system, how effective will the judiciary facilitate the current anti-corruption fight? Guests on Good Morning Nigeria will be providing answers shortly.
All right, many thanks, Abdulsalam Jubril, for that background. Joining us now to discuss the issue, I would like to welcome Dr. Esa Onoja, who is the Chief of Staff to the Chairman of ICPC. Dr. Onoja, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
It's a pleasure, sir. Good morning.
Here with us in the studios is a regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria, Mazi Afam Osigwe, is a former Secretary General of the Nigerian Bar Association. Pleasure to have you with us, Mazi.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
And also joining us from our Kaduna studio is Yunus Ustaz Usman, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Ustaz Yunus is a legal practitioner. It's good to have you join us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Morning.
And joining us via Zoom from Lagos is Professor Ise Sage, Chairman, Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption, PACAC. Thanks so much for joining us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. We understand that the countdown to Professor Sage's Zoom connection is right at hand, so we're going to have time to reboot his connection and then go back to him in Lagos. But let's begin, gentlemen. Our conversation this morning is on anti-corruption and the judicial system. May we then have an understanding of what a judicial system is, because probably the layman will say judicial system goes straight to the bench. What is a judicial system? Let's begin with Mazi Afam Osigwe with us here in the studios.
Well, if you look at judiciary from the point of view of those who adjudicate, the judges, the magistrates, the justices who sit in judgment over cases, then you limit it to the bench, or what we call the bench, the judiciary, as provided by the Constitution. But when you look at the entire judicial system, that would encompass the law enforcement agencies, the prosecutorial agencies, the lawyers who are one way or the other involved in it, the investigators. So all these things, because they all play a role in the matters getting into court and being tried by the courts. And then also in civil matters, extends to parties who are involved. Now this would appear to be encompass the entire judicial system as not being limited to a mere description of the judiciary encompassing those who judge.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mazi Afam Osigwe. We'll now come to Esa Onoja, Chief of Staff to the ICPC Chairman. Corruption.
I was just wondering,
okay.
Juma, if you don't mind, I would like us to further explore the amplitude of the judicial system, following from what Mazi Afam Osigwe has said, because it's a value chain when you say judicial system. He's talked about law enforcement agents, investigators, the lawyers, and then those who are on the bench. I would like learned senior advocate Yunus Ustaz Usman to also give us his view of this. Now, can we liken the judicial system to a value chain assembly line process so that one chain affects the other and so on and so forth before we get into the nitty-gritty of anti-corruption and probably what has happened in our jurisprudence?
Yes. For example, why most cases, particularly criminal cases, are lost is from the prosecutorial aspect. Either the police will not do their job well, or the lawyer does not do his research, or he did not interview his client or the witness before coming to court. When they mess up, there is nothing the judge can do. You cannot blame the judge. We'll come to that later, but I will show you that most of the grievances we have against the judiciary ought to go against the people who arraign these people, or the prosecutors, or the lawyers who are defending or prosecuting these cases. Basically, cases are won or lost, not in the courtroom, but at the pre-trial level, before you arraign somebody. Most government cases are lost because of poor prosecution. But at the end of it, we say the judiciary.
Thank you so much. You know, Ustaz Usman, I'm back here in the studio, Esa, Onoja. What happens to the chain of prosecution when you go to the court with, with cases like this, and judicial system is there fully ready to, to go into the case and prosecute those who are guilty? So what happens to the chain that you have between you and the judicial system as, as people who bring in accused persons to the court in case of corruption cases? What do you do? What happens to the chain of command there?
Thank you very much. But before I go to the chain of command, I'd like to speak to the issue of the judicial system. Yes. Another important aspect of the judicial system are the laws, the rules, which are the basic tools for the courts. So the strengths and weaknesses of the laws also manifest in the outcome of proceedings. But with respect to the value chain of court proceedings, I think it will not be complete to look at only one aspect and to say it's only the investigators or the prosecutors that their failure is 100% accountable for the weaknesses that we see in the outcome of corruption cases. We need to look at the picture from a broader perspective. Everybody has a role to play. I won't.
How broad is the perspective you're talking about?
We need to include not only investigators, prosecutors, courts, but also defense counsel. Because we have had defense counsel in this country who have filed applications to say the laws that set up anti-corruption agencies are rubbish. In other words, that the anti-corruption agencies should be restrained from performing the very functions that the National Assembly established them to perform. So I find it difficult to appreciate that sort of reasoning, that when the National Assembly creates an institution, empowers the institution, you go to court and say, no, that institution should not work. Maybe, so I think we need to interrogate that very seriously, not just to say 100% cases fail because of poor investigation, poor prosecution. And while we're on that issue, courts in other jurisdictions have held in corruption cases that because of the public policy imperative of stamping out corruption, that courts should hesitate in dismissing corruption cases because of defense submission of poor investigation. So I would like other speakers to speak to that before I continue. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Onoja. Let's come back to Mazi Alfa Musigwe. Mazi Alfa, we have touched on the features of the judicial system and the players also in the judicial system. Maybe we can interrogate some of these features and personalities or institutions very briefly before we now again narrow it down to anti-corruption. For instance, I mean, Onoja was just talking a while ago about rules and laws being critical elements of the judicial system. In the case of anti-corruption, do we have sufficiency of laws? 20 years ago, persons might have said, oh, we didn't have enough laws. And then came EFCC, and then came, ICPC, and then came EFCC. Then you have all kinds of legislation relating to money laundering, relating to failed banks, and so on and so forth. But is our challenge now a question of insufficiency of rules and laws, or the way the players in the judicial system use these rules and laws to deliver justice?
I always insist that our problem in Nigeria has never been the insufficiency of laws. It's about the human beings. It's about those who investigate these matters, who prosecute these matters, who defend these matters, who preside over these cases, and then the lawmakers. I would not agree with Dr. Onoja that a lawyer's challenging the constitutionality of a law is absurd. It's within the person's right. And the fact that the National Assembly has made a law does not mean that it is automatically right. Many sections of a law can be struck down. We saw the Supreme Court do that in Ojikalo's case. We saw the Court of Appeal strike down certain provisions of the ACJA. These are legitimate challenges. But the worry arises when, for example, a defense counsel uses a preliminary objection and takes it to keep a case in limbo for 10 years, even though the Administration of Criminal Justice Act has come in to stop that, and the Supreme Court decisions affirming that they cannot use interlocutory appeals to stop trials. But when gimmicks are introduced, every decision by a court is appealed, and at the end of the day, witnesses may die, witnesses may lose interest, witnesses may become untraceable, or may even be intimidated. And then a short investigation, because it's a value chain. If any link in the chain is weak or dysfunctional, you can't have a seamless movement. And then when you also, even the appointment of judges play a role. When you also appoint wrong persons as magistrates, as judges, and they do not have a good grasp of the law, or they lack the integrity to decide based on the facts and evidence presented and the law, you have a problem. When you also have lawmakers who do not really study law, because even in the during the colonial period and post-colonial period, corruption cases were prosecuted under the Penal Code and Criminal Code. These laws were introduced to create new agencies, not necessarily, and then create new offenses, especially money laundering, in the light of financial action task force requirements and all that. Not necessarily that some of these offenses cannot be pigeonholed under existing provisions in the law. So it has never been sufficiency of law. It has been our ability, and also the Nigerian way of doing things. You will destroy him, leave him now. Oh boy, why are you doing this? He's their friend. Just see as you go manage him. After some time, everybody will lose interest. It's a societal too. So when we blame it on the laws, when we blame it on the judges, no. And even when you come to the judges, the courts are the end points. So whatever mess, if there's a mess indeed, ends up in the court, and people want to blame the work. For example, there has been short investigation or statements you obtain in violation of the law, maybe confessional statements, or certain procedural errors occur. Of course, the defense counsel would want to depend on them to get a case thrown out. But the bottom line is that every of these things have to work well. If we all listen to the cases of the Nigerians now who are standing trial in the U.S., it will be one no cake Invictus, and then the hush puppy, except for the person who has done a plea bargain, on the hush puppy, I'm not saying anything about his guilt. But if you read the investigation report, you see how they took time. In the hush puppy one, they said there was even no complaint. They said the flamboyant lifestyle display pictures on Instagram
made them take interest in him. And they started investigating him, and they saw that some phone numbers, some email addresses were linked to certain transactions. So they red flagged him and started investigating and started linking him up to. And I still insist, I'm not commenting on his guilt. He's presumed innocent. But you hardly see a Nigerian investigation that gives you such that even when you're reading it, in your quiet area, you may be able to say, I think there's a point here. You don't get that in Nigeria. It's only in Nigeria that the police and even ICPC, FCC, they seek to only convict people based on statements obtained. Nobody builds up a case file. No investigator comes to tell you the detailed work. He said he made a statement, and this is his statement. And the court simply comes. There's nobody who also tries to justify that the contents of those statements are actually probable or true. No spade work is done. And these are the issues we are talking about. Detailed investigation, detailed drafting. Sometimes charges are drafted in a very laughable manner, in a manner that does not, even the section that are charging on the charge does not reflect, or the evidence available will not sustain them. I've seen fine work done by investigators, proper convictions that were watertight. I'm not suggesting that in all cases it's bad, but sometimes the attention goes to the ones that are lost, and they do not really define the system, but they only point us in the direction of these are probably areas we may need to look at and make changes so that this value chain will be able to benefit the society, so that we'll be able to, and even recent things you read in the newspaper, when we also talk about this, when you talk about laws, is the ability of human beings to circumvent them and go scot-free, the political will to bring some people to justice. You read more things in public space, the public condemns more people that never get charged to court. And there are cases you would expect to see in court, and they never get there. They're also part of it. Let me stop at this point.
Mazia Famosigwe, thank you very much. I don't know whether the our connection to Lagos has been restored. Okay, all right, they're trying to revive that. Let's return to learned senior advocate Yunus Ustaz Usman. Yunus Ustaz, you've listened to our two guests here with us in the Abuja studios. Let's have your take on this, whether adequacy of rules and laws, and then the personnel and the institutions that are critical in the proper functioning of the judicial system. What's your take on all of this?
May I correct one impression my friend Dr. Onoja made? He said that in corruption cases that the judges will bend not to convict or throw out a case even when the prosecution is bad and so on. If you do so, you are also confusing what judicial system is. You are depriving the people of their own right to be properly heard and for their issues to be determined. It is not the judge's duty at all to bend backwards with a view to helping you. No, it is for you to do your homework. If you don't do your homework, the judge has no power, he has no jurisdiction to help you. If he does that, he has disobeyed his oath of office. He has no power to do so. Let's come to this now. Now, you see, I've always said so. It's not inadequacy of laws. In fact, what we have today is confusion of laws. Total confusion. With the greatest respect, when Obasanjo came, because he wanted the West, in particular America, to support him, after EFCC, they created ICPC, continue to create all sorts of laws that have even themselves ended up in confusing one another. That is the problem we have. The penal code, the criminal code, and so on can take care of all these things we are doing today. It is only if we can amend where the punishments are too low. We can amend to bring in these things. The way we are going, in fact, some provisions of the EFCC and ICPC were struck down sometime because of this confusion. And then you have the Money Laundering Act. And so in fact, it is a confused system created by, with the greatest respect, the National Assembly that sometimes will not do its work properly. And so you leave everybody in confusion, even including lawyers, because you don't know which one is in vogue. And so we try to look at the areas where there is confusion and try to get the ones that have the largest confused sea struck down. So we have too many laws, in fact, too many. And the issue is that, for example, there is no need for ICPC and EFCC to coexist. It's duplication of everything and spending government money on nothing. You are duplicating everything. It doesn't help matters.
Ustaz Usman, thank you so much for your input there. Now, we keep going back and forth on corruption in Nigeria. It's like corruption is from the top to the bottom. How do we begin to dismantle this structure of corruption in Nigeria? It's as if we keep paying lip service to corruption in this country.
Thank you very much. But before I answer that, I want to clarify. The point I made was in reference to some decisions of courts. We have a decision from Rivers State, another decision from Ekiti State, where ICPC, EFCC were not parties to the suit. And yet the court made an order restraining them from investigating. So it's rudimentary that before you make an order against a person, you hear the person. And more recently, there was a decision of a court in Abuja here where a person under investigation filed an action against ICPC, and ICPC filed a counter affidavit. And then the party went behind ICPC's back to withdraw the suit against ICPC, and yet the judge made an order releasing the money under investigation. So those were the instances I referred to or alluded to. Okay. Not hearing the anti-corruption agencies and yet making orders restraining them from functioning. I know arguments against provisions of statute is the bread and butter of the Defense Council. Yes. But what I'm saying is that courts should hesitate before making orders restraining law enforcement agencies from performing their statutory functions, particularly before hearing them. Now, in reference to the of corruption in Nigeria, yes, I agree that it's endemic. Some say it's systemic, and from the perspective of seeing what goes on sometimes, I would say it's alarming. So I think we need to interrogate our value system more. We need to, if possible, catch them young from the school. I'm saying this because I'm an educator, and a colleague of mine told me an experience some time ago where two students were conversing, and the other one said, your parent is in this institution, is in a position, why is he not doing it? And the child said the parent will not do such a thing. And another student confided in my colleague that she would rather her parent join the bad wagon. So you have a parent who is not willing to join the bad wagon, and you have a child who, maybe because of peer pressure, is not seeing the ills. So I think we should address the value system. Thankfully, the ICPC is collaborating with the Office of the SGF to come up with a national ethics and integrity policy. So hopefully when that comes out, it will go down to the school system, to the churches, to the mosques. I think we need religious and traditional institutions have a play, and if we could diminish the craze for money and value more the things that really mean or have substance, I think we'll go a long way in reducing and minimizing corruption.
Well, Dr. Najat, I mean, those points you have raised, they are also relevant to discussing the players in the judicial system, not just the larger society. We understand we can rejoin Professor Issa Shage now, who's with us via Skype. Professor Shage, I wouldn't know whether you were able to listen in on the comments of the other three guests, Yunus Ustaz Usman, Learned Senior Advocate in Kaduna, Afam Osigwe here with us in the studios in Abuja, as well as Dr. Esa Anoja of the ICPC, also here with us in the studios. We started off by trying to examine or explain or understand the judicial system, its features and its players, and a number of those features and players have been identified. We're focusing our conversation on the judicial system, which in terms of looking at the major planks of the anti-corruption fight will relate to the sanctions regime. We know there are preventive measures, there are also prohibitory measures, but this is the sanctions and punishment end of it. But even that sanctions and punishment end is a value chain, and we're looking at each of the players and institutions. Let's have your take on this, whether on the laws and the rules, the quality of investigation, such as Afam Osigwe was talking about earlier, and sometimes what has been referred to as shoddy prosecution. Prof, let's listen into you.
Thank you very much. The issue of the quality of investigation has been on the front burner of the PACAC and the EFCC and the other anti-corruption agencies in the last 4 years. And because we're aware of their deficiency in this regard, a lot of training programs have been mounted, which were well attended, and manuals have been prepared to assist the investigative process, specifically to ensure that when investigation is going on, investigators who have police background also have cooperate with their colleagues in the legal area, so that they know exactly what to look for, what the ingredients of the crime, and therefore what to look for, and that they should be reviewing their findings from time to time. Also, a lot of programs have been held on drawing up charges, all over the country. In fact, these programs were mounted not only for federal anti-corruption agencies, but for ministries of justice all over the country. So there's consciousness of the lapses in the area of investigation and preparing of charges, and much work has been done to try and make up for those deficiencies in the last 4 years.
So, Sage, we keep saying in the last 4 years, and when our learned senior advocate of Nigeria, Yunus Ustaz Usman, spoke about the duplication of these agencies. When we watch investigations outside this country, we see synergy between the FBI, the internal affairs, the police, and all that. Why is it we cannot come together as an entity, as a corruption, entity to fight corruption itself? Why can't we sanitize within ourselves? Every agency is acting independently of the other and not giving information to the other. So how can we bring this to the table and bring all these agencies together to work together in synergy to ensure that corruption cases are dealt with at judicial level so that there won't be any problem?
Yes, these two had been identified in the past. Also, you say I keep on saying the last 4 years. That's really what I know about. I know that a committee has been established which has just membership from all the anti-corruption agencies so that they can pass information to each other, and that where one has an information which can be better used by another one, you then pass it on. So there is a meeting, there is a committee involving all of them. There's a protocol now on this matter. And it's a question, the question one may ask is whether it is being properly utilized. We know we have a problem there. We have agency jealousy and envy and competition. All these things come into play. But definitely the system exists that will enable them cooperate with each other and assist each other and give way in areas where the other one is strong to allow that one continue. So it exists. So maybe we need to put more pressure on them to take advantage of it.
Professor Saga, I still would like to stay with you. In this case, we'll return to the aspect of rules and laws in the judicial system relevant to anti-corruption. For a while, the ACJA, that is the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, was hailed, as it were, as the silver bullet to help pierce through the many delays we've always had in criminal jurisprudence, particularly in dealing with corruption cases. But here we are. It looks like major players in that field are themselves shocked by the latest decision by the learned justices of the Supreme Court. I want to come back to the issue of the conflict between some of the provisions of the ACJA, that is the Criminal Justice Administration Act, and the Constitution. Because part of the argument of some persons is, look, there is a problem with this law, return to the National Assembly so that it can be amended. While ACJA was in the legislative crucible, it wasn't possible for key stakeholders to have seen these loopholes and therefore walked around it so that as much as possible, when matters do get to the bench, we wouldn't have the kind of shocking reversal as we have seen with the decision by the learned justices of the Supreme Court.
Sorry, we have bad weather here, so everything wasn't clear. But let me just summarize what I thought you asked. Whether something could not have been done to prevent the decision of the Supreme Court on the Udegu case, which is popularly known as Ojikalu case, but Ojikalu was not a party to that case. Am I right? Whether something could not have been done to avoid the apparent lacuna that created that problem?
Well, that is fast forward. Am I right? That is fast forward, but it could be part of the conversation. Just proceed. Yes.
Okay. My take on that has been consistent. The Supreme Court had no excuse. There is no provision in the Constitution which prohibits a High Court judge who is promoted from going back to the High Court to conclude part-hard cases. No such provision. The only law that exists that touches on that point is the Administration of Criminal Justice Act. So there is a law, and there is nothing in the Constitution that contradicts it. And my view is simply that the Supreme Court willfully just decided to do what it did, throwing away 12 years of very hard blood, sweat, and tears proceedings, going from High Court to Court of Appeal to Supreme Court, back to the High Court. Everything was thrown away. And it's just theoretical to say the case can be started again. It cannot be started again. We can't start another 12-year thing. The judges have retired, witnesses have disappeared, so many things have gone. I mean, it's impossible. So effectively, that case is dead. And I say with full conviction that there was no excuse for that decision. We operate a common law system. The common law system has the most flexible manner of applying laws. It allows you to apply law in order to achieve justice. That's why we have equity. We say equity prevails over the law. So if there's technicality, you have an equitable jurisdiction in any court to overcome any difficulty created by law and use equity to achieve justice. And I must say, this is palpably lacking in the decisions of the Supreme Court. It has been lacking for a number of years now, and it continues to be lacking. So there's no excuse for that. Yes, we are not, probably the Constitution is now going to be amended, but it's completely unnecessary. It's just being done because of the harm that has been caused by that judgment.
Well, Professor Sage, as I said, you were on a fast forward. I saw Yunus Ustaz, the senior advocate, a while ago on the screen. Maybe we'll get his views on this. Senior advocate, the odd use of Kalu case is merely illustrative. The core of my question, which Prof didn't quite get well because of interference in terms of the audio, is as follows. When ACJA was being made, the view, and after it was made, the view was that, oh, this is a wonderful piece of legislation. We are not going to have the prolonged delays that we used to have. There will be no more frustration of justice. And then suddenly, in terms of adjudication, you are now seeing the lacuna in the provisions and the conflict of the provisions of ACJA with the provisions of the Constitution as the Supreme Court held. I was just wondering, because if we have to go back again to the National Assembly to avoid this same kind of handicap arising in future, what do you think needs to be done? Do you have enough stakeholder consultation in all of this so that you can cross the T's and dot the I's and plug up potential loopholes, even though you cannot possibly foresee what might happen in future?
It is just like I said earlier on. With the greatest respect, National Assembly needs to wake up. If they had compared the provisions of the Administration of Criminal Justice System before it was finally passed, they wouldn't have ended up in that problem. And any provision of any other law that contravenes any provision of the Constitution becomes null and void, because the Constitution is the ground norm. Then I'm sorry, I won't say I'm disappointed, but I'm surprised at the submissions of Malayan Brothers Silk Professor Ise Siage, when he says Supreme Court just decided do what they did. In fact, I would have been totally disappointed if Supreme Court did not do so. Let me tell you, you see, let us analyze these things and let the public know. Don't make the public to be in more confusion. Now, there is a provision that says this is the Supreme Court. This is the Court of Appeal, High Court, and so on. Now, if the Supreme Court had not done what it did, it means one day you can now bring somebody from the Court of Appeal to come and sit at the Federal High Court or State High Court, bring somebody from the State High Court to go and sit at the Supreme Court to try a particular case. What type of confusion would that create? And the Constitution does not allow that at all. The Constitution knows why those provisions were made, so that we will not have that legal confusion. I'm totally surprised that Professor Sage, maybe he does not appreciate these things. I think when it comes to practice, he will appreciate these points. The issue is that one judge cannot continue to be jumping from his jurisdiction to another to go and try. We had this case. We were doing the Mohammed Abacha case. Obasanjo brought somebody, a judge from Switzerland, to come and try Mohammed Abacha on our source. We went to court and say you cannot do so. Then he attempted to bring, when the case was before the Federal High Court, he was trying to bring a magistrate here to say, no, Federal High Court will not do so. You see, this is the type of confusion that Professor Sage seems not to understand. Please, let him stay in practice, even if it was for 6 months. He will appreciate these things. How can a judge jump from Court of Appeal to go as low as going to sit at the trial court again? Are you demoting him? I mean, let us not confuse the system. Nigeria is confused already. Let us not confuse the people the more, Prof.
I can see you would love to react to that now.
Yes, I think with the greatest respect, Professor Sage is entirely wrong. Now, the decision by the Supreme Court in respect of the case popularly called Ojusoka is unassailable. There was a question Chief Ozekomek asked in the preliminary objection he raised in respect of this same matter at the Federal High Court. I think it was Chief Ozekomek. He said, how will this judge, the justice of the Court of Appeal, who is now required to sit in the Federal High Court, sign? Will he sign his judgment as justice of the Court of Appeal? Or will he sign it as judge
Federal High Court. He said if he does so, he lies. If he signs the Justice of the Court of Appeal, then he cannot. Now, you see, this may appear simple, but it's not. Allowing that provision to stand means allowing the President of the Court of Appeal to interfere with the management of a Federal High Court or a High Court of FCT. If he can post back or a State High Court, a Justice of the Court of Appeal to go and sit, it means with respect to that matter, the Court of Appeal superintends it. It's not very simple. And again, that ACJ provision, to my mind, is unconstitutional because the laws do not impose jurisdiction on an individual judge. Jurisdiction is given to a court to be exercised by any of the courts. And that's why the Constitution says that this court shall be considered by a of at least one judge of that court. As at the time the Justice of the Court of Appeal went to sit as a judge in the Federal High Court, could he rightly be said to be a judge of that court? When you are talking about the composition of that court, would that be a sound argument to say he was a judge of... His name is not on the roll. He has been elevated and he has ceased to be a... And again, I thought there was judicial decision in the case of Obunya and Okudo, which the Supreme Court decided around in the 70s. And people were saying, no, in that case, the difference is that there's no provision in the law. The issue that went on in that case, can a person who has ceased to be a judge of this court continue to sit in that court? Even if there was no such a CJA provision, in the light of this decision, didn't we see that it was obvious that that provision was unconstitutional? And I will not also be fair to the listening public to allow a comment made by Dr. Onoja to go unanswered. He made a veiled reference that Abuja High Court made an order against ICPC when they were not a party. I think that is a suppressed fact. This matter is in public domain, so we can as well comment on it. The ICPC, in violation of a law, wrote a letter to a bank to freeze an account. The owner of the account instructed a lawyer to represent them and sued both the bank and ICPC. And towards judgment, the bank considered that they were wrong in freezing the account without an order of court. And the lawyer felt that there was no need continuing with ICPC and discontinued against them. And the court gave judgment in that regard. Since there is no legitimate lawful reason why the funds in this account cannot be assessed. And that was what the judge did. The judge did not give judgment against ICPC. It is the bank that restrained access on the directive of ICPC without a lawful decision of judge order. And the Court of Appeal has made a pronouncement on it. In GT Bank and Adedamola, our problem in this country is that because we are law enforcement agencies, we take the laws into our hands. And that is why you see so many monetary judgments against the government. Because people would rather subvert the laws than obey it in the anti-corruption fight. It is corruption of a grander scale to subvert the law or to act in violation of the law in a bid to fight corruption.
All right, Mazi Afamosigwe and the other gentleman, let's clarify something for the benefit of our viewers, because we've been, the professionals have been talking about Abuja and what played out in the so-called Ojus or Kalu case. Now, this is how our judicial system operates. A judge who tries a cause is the same judge that will deliver judgment. If at any point in time between the institution of the case and the delivery of judgment, maybe 2 days to the delivery of judgment, something happens to the judge, well, we are human beings, the judge passes away, the judge is promoted to a higher bench, say from the High Court to the Court of Appeal, that case previously will start afresh. That is what is called de novo. That the case will start afresh, notwithstanding how long the case had taken to get to that point before judgment is delivered. Now, ACJA, that is the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, recognized that that process had been used to sometimes frustrate the ends of justice. So ACJA now provided that whether or not a judge has been elevated, say from the High Court to the Court of Appeal, that judge can return from the Court of Appeal to the lower court to continue with the trial and end the trial of that case. Now, the Supreme Court says the provisions of that ACJA are in conflict with the provisions of the Constitution because of the hierarchy, of course, High Court, Court of Appeal, and the Supreme Court. So that is the issue that the legal experts have been talking about. I know that Professor Ese Sage was, shaking his head to respond. If we can see getting back.
No, the Zoom is off.
Yeah, the Zoom we understand is off. So we'll have the opportunity of returning to him. But Dr. Noja, we don't want to dwell on the issue of the bank and whether the garnishee order that he got. But let's still return to this aspect of AGJA and the frustration that arises from all of this. The key question is, what should the National Assembly, being the law enacting body, do in this particular case? Is it a question of, looking at the constitutional provisions, or just saying the aspects of AGJA have been struck down, so we'll live with that? What does that mean to the effective prosecution of, say, anti-corruption cases?
Okay, thank you very much. Pardon me, I would like to refer my learned brother to Section 45 of the ICPC Act that clearly empowers the chairman of the ICPC to issue a no debit order to a bank. Not many lawyers are conversant with it. Then in relation to the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, it was Section 396 sub 7 that the Supreme Court struck down. And the basis of that decision is that by virtue of Section 153 of the Constitution, that a judge or a justice of the Court of Appeal is not a judge of the Federal High Court. The decision has been given, so we must move on. I mean the anti-corruption agencies. And in view of the fact that it was the same Supreme Court that affirmed Section 306 of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act and several other provisions of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, I think we have to move on and take it in good faith. But before the issue of whether the role the National Assembly can play, I would like to say that there are provisions of the same Section 396 of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act that are not being applied with regularity in courts. For instance, there's a provision that parties in criminal cases can only be entitled to 5 adjournments. But if there is the exigency that the judge feels that more than 5 adjournments are required, the interval between one adjournment and the next should not be more than 7 days, inclusive of Saturdays and Sundays. I would like to see that provision being applied with greater regularity. And I believe if it is studiously enforced by courts, the issue of delay will be minimized. Secondly, the same Section 396 of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act provides that if a party demonstrates that they are not serious, that the judge can impose costs, including costs against counsel. And some judges have actually imposed costs against defense counsel, and that has made them to sit up. So I feel that if that provision is applied and enforced, the issue of Section 396 sub 7 will be minimized, except for the pending cases. The only option, as I see, the only option that I see to a solution is an amendment of the Constitution. Because if the Constitution is not amended, then the issue of a justice of the Court of Appeal going to the Federal High Court to sit will be very, very difficult. But while we're at that, there may be another solution. Instead of amending the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, the National Assembly may consider creating a special anti-corruption court. And that also may involve an amendment of the Constitution.
if you create a special anti-corruption court and the judges get elevated, will it not be the same challenge you face with? I was just wondering. Let me put this on the table. Maybe we'll begin with Senior Advocate Yunus Ustaz Usman. The process of constitutional amendment, we know it can be tedious, but the process of amending the ACJA might be simple. But couldn't we have administrative recourse to all of this on the basis of what the Supreme Court has now decided? It simply says that if you are a judge of the High Court and you get elevated to the Court of Appeal, you cannot, on the basis of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, come back to the High Court to continue with the case. And the basis is that your appointment, the date of your, as soon as you are pronounced appointed, then you no longer belong to the High Court. Of course, once you take your oath of office, it also compounds the issue. Couldn't this be looked at administratively to say, look, what are those cases being handled by judges who have been proposed for elevation? What is the state of the trial of those cases? Are the cases near judgment? I'm not saying frustrate any person from being elevated. If a judge is near the end of a case, why promote him upstairs? Why don't we just say freeze in the meantime, whoever is in charge administratively, don't announce his elevation, don't promote him, but it is clear that at the next available opportunity, he will be elevated. Let him finish with his case, and then, of course, he goes upstairs. Rather than say, finish, leave the case, you will now start afresh 12 years when evidence and witnesses may no longer be available.
You are perfectly right. In fact, at a stage, we were invited before this crisis to give pieces of advice. And I said, look, tell some of these judges where cases are almost at their concluding stages, even if their names have been submitted, say, please, in the interest of your country, please wait until you conclude this case. If they say you cannot come again until the next promotion, it is okay. The next promotion will come. How are you even sure that by tomorrow, when you have to go, you won't die today? So nothing stops that. But when I made that suggestion, somebody said that, that I was trying to prevent some people from being promoted. I said no, because these cases will definitely suffer. If you go upstairs there, the case will have to be started de novo afresh. So 1 month or 2 months for you to conclude won't take anything from you, really. And wherever you are meant to go, you will go, no matter the time. If you are not meant to go, you won't go.
As it happened
before, but they said I was saying some people should not be promoted. I didn't say so. I said if the cases are nearing completion, please wait and conclude, because of the effect, particularly for serious cases.
Just wait.
I don't think so. Even the judges themselves would not want to wait. Because, I mean, in the judiciary, there's what is called seniority. Yeah. So you may be waiting to finish that case, you lose your seniority. I mean, because it takes effect from the time you get. Even the judges would not want that. And they may not also be sure that the executive may be willing to confirm the appointment even after doing that case. And then counsel, seeing that you're waiting to finish that case, may deploy some means to keep you there for a much longer time. And there will always be cases you're about to finish. That is the truth. And the cases may never end. Who will be the judge of...
But Ustaz said something, that because we are human beings, you don't want to wait. Suppose the day before you don't want to wait,
the person wants to know that he has been appointed. If it's the will of God that he won't take the oath, that's a different thing. It will not be for us to judge. But why are we sure that when he finishes, that the president will still appoint? Because the moment the president makes the appointment, he ceases to be a judge of the other court. That's right. So it means the appointment will not be made. So how sure will this person be? How sure will the person be that if he gives that judgment, that the executive will not be unhappy with him with that judgment, and now say, he's a corrupt judge for giving this judgment, acquitting these people. Now it's even God that has brought him out. How sure are we?
Onoja.
Yeah. I don't think it would be fair to stagnate a person simply because he's at a particular court at a particular period Then in addition to that, the federal character principle, appointments are made based on the federal character principle. So if a particular judicial officer is stagnated at a particular period, definitely somebody from his state or zone may be appointed. Yes, so the person will lose the opportunity.
Okay, well, gentlemen, thank you. We know that the issues, but earlier, Dr. Onoja, you talked about the public policy imperative. And now we are bringing in the issue of the personal interest of a likely appointee to a higher bench. Gentlemen, we're taking a short break now. When we return, we'll continue with this conversation.
She cried. She cried in anguish and in pain. She bears the scourge of her grief. She toils in vain for justice and succumbs to silence. He gloats over his malady. Like a beast, he pounces with no remorse. Her cry meant nothing. Her pain feeds her shame. Like an orphan, she is left to grieve in solitude. But no more will she cry in vain. Her adversaries will henceforth bear the brunt of their bestiality. Rape is evil. Rape is a plague, a pandemic of monumental consequences. We must unite and kick it out of our society.
Connect with NTA and stand against rape and rapists. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
As a strong immune system increases the chances of victims surviving COVID-19, a corruption-free society creates opportunities for citizens to thrive and prosper. Build your immunity. Stop corruption now. Report all acts of corruption to ICPC on this toll-free number 0800 22 55 4272. This message is brought to you by ICPC and NTA.
The number of the COVID-19 cases in Nigeria is increasing daily, with many more tests ongoing. The battle of testing, isolating, treating, and attending to the affected persons rests heavily on the shoulders of our health workers, constantly putting their lives on the line and at risk to contain this virus, save and protect the lives of millions of Nigerians. To these health workers, we at the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, on behalf of millions of Nigerians, say a big thank you for all that you have done and are doing. To the security agencies enforcing the lockdown and every other frontliner, we say thank you for putting your lives on the line to save ours. There is no amount of words that can quantify our gratitude. Thank you. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest television network.
All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the NTA. We are continuing with this conversation. The Zoom connection to Professor Sage isn't been restored. So we'll continue with our three guests. Yunus Ustaz, senior advocate in Kaduna, Mazia Famosigwe here, and Onoja also here with us in the studios. Now let's get to the court proper. We talked about other aspects of the judicial system. I was just wondering, what can we say is the judicial attitude towards corruption cases? Maybe we'll begin with Yunus Ustaz. What is the attitude of our courts? Is it one of judicial activism? In other words, following up on the public policy imperative that, look, corruption is a cancer, we must fight it, and therefore we get to the justice of the cause rather than the technicalities of it? Or is it one of restraint to say, look, play by the rules, follow the books, just as you have in common law. If it doesn't fit, then it must be thrown out. What have you experienced, Yunus Ustaz, senior advocate?
I think my experience in these few years is to this effect. The courts, particularly the Supreme Court, always say no to corruption. And you can see the effect of this in the cases of David Jang, this former governor of Taraba, and so on. But then, when there is a major deficiency in the trial, particularly when it can be shown that the person had not been given his natural and constitutional right to fair hearing, then there is nothing the courts can do. But so far, so good. So far, so good. Even the enemies of the judiciary will agree. There are two convictions, particularly that of Taraba and the Vijang, that I think that the issue of we must stem out corruption from Nigeria is really pronounced in consonance with the laws. The courts really are not doing bad in that aspect. And I continue to drum it, irrespective of whose ox is God, that the main problem we have is with the prosecution, mainly. And I tell you one experience I had. I was to prosecute one case for one of the agencies. I said, bring me these documents. They say, okay, the documents were there. They were bringing them the following day. When I did not see them, and I knew if we went to court, we would lose, I say, I'm no longer doing it. Do you know, up till today, I understand that they have not been able to go ahead with that case. Meanwhile, those were the documents that they said were retrieved. We just have to do our homework, particularly with ICPC, EFCC, and all these other agencies. The courts will say, yes, we are ready to fight corruption. We will fight corruption, but they have no right. For the oath they have taken, they have no right to jump into the arena. That is, to take up the prosecution. If they do so, they are offending their oath of office. No matter how pragmatic, no matter how willing they are, there is an extent to which they can go as judges. Do your homework. If you don't do your homework, don't blame anybody.
So much, Yunus Ustaz Osman, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Mazi Afam Osigwe, corruption, since President Buhari became president, corruption has been at the fight against corruption has been at the forefront. Corruption is all over the world. Why is it so in-depth, so into our system in Africa? Is it a black thing to steal so much money and not know what to do with it?
It's not a black thing, it's a human thing.
Okay.
But then again, with us in Nigeria, particular emphasis, not because we're particularly better, but because we have weak enforcement of laws. Our procurement process makes it easy for people to steal. And any system that waits for you at the end of the process to catch you after you have stolen money, we end up contending with the huge sums of money you have stolen. Most of the money is stolen from the public sector. A system that allows the chief executive to keep taking up money, to pay so much money into the account of somebody and get it withdrawn, and then to do so many things, we talk about it and nobody does anything. A system that does not put in place a process for auditing the lifestyle of public office holders. That system is bound to fail. Because the same people, the Magu case will show you that even the people who are fighting this process do not seem to be immune to allegations of doing the same thing. How can a budgetary process in a system say, oh, you're putting a constituency project, and suddenly, so by sleight of hand, the money ends up in the hands of the prosecutor? I followed so many investigations by the ICPC that showed constituency projects being executed and not being delivered to the constituents. Keke, ambulances, so many things packed in the house of the legislator. What system makes it such that he takes these things that does not go to the beneficiary, that makes him access this money? What system makes a PAMSEC to keep signing out money and nothing happens? We must look at the procurement process. How true is the allegation that the budgeting process, not necessarily within this administration, down the line, is skewed such that people put things in the budget for themselves and they're able to get it out, and yet we have a bid process or have a public procurement act that says how things should be done?
How does it happen? And we must look at the Bureau de Change system in this, because in most cases of money laundering I read, a Bureau de Change is involved. Yeah. Is it not time we looked at the Bureau de Changes to either phase them out or to ensure that huge payout of cash is not there? I understand the CBN regulation says that they cannot do transfer, that the goods they sell is the foreign currency, so they give it to you. And yet the essence of money laundering is to bring in huge sums of money through the banking system. So are we not subverting some of the provisions of these laws by allowing some of these things? I should not be seen to be talking against certain businesses. But if we are really serious, if the proof now is that people change their naira into foreign currencies to be able to conceal them, we must find a way of stopping it. I said it on this program some months ago. What system allows people to own many hundreds of houses without being required to register them? Is it not time we looked at the tedious provision under the Land Use Act that makes it difficult for you to obtain governor's consent to register a house? Or is it not time we put in place measures to make it easy to obtain titles and put in mandatory process that all houses must be registered so that both the legal and beneficial owners must be known? Until we do this, we are merely scratching the surface.
Afam Osigwe, thank you very much. Dr. Onoja, earlier you were talking about a value system. Some persons would argue that the scenario sketched by Mazi Afam Osigwe is possible because of societal indifference, societal encouragement, and societal expectation that, fine, it's his time, I will await mine. And there is no societal reprimand for the malfeasance and blatant criminality we see meted out against our Commonwealth. How do we deal with this?
Yeah, thank you very much. Before I talk about the tolerance of corruption.
Tolerance and encouragement.
Yes. Let me speak to the issue of judicial activism. Rightly, the Supreme Court has been, in the past 4 years, has been relatively consistent in its policy decisions against corruption, to the effect that when a public officer is found to be in possession of resources above his legitimate sources of income, he needs to explain, it's not for the law enforcement agencies to explain. So in that respect, the Supreme Court has been consistent. My worry is that policy stance of the Supreme Court does not always go down to the trial courts and to the Court of Appeal. Because the same Supreme Court that affirmed Section 306 of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, there are decisions of high courts and even a division of the Court of Appeal now that when a preliminary objection is filed in a criminal case, it must be heard first. So the effect of that is that there will be a stay of proceeding.
I'm sorry to jump in here. We needed to make a correction on this. Juma,
yes.
You and I were talking about this. We needed to make a correction. While Yunus Ustaz Usman was citing examples of Supreme Court decisions on corruption cases, he gave the example of the former governor of Taraba State, which is Jolly Unyame. He was convicted and is serving his sentence. He also erroneously, unfortunately, referred to David Jang of Plateau. It wasn't David Jang. It was, in fact, Joshua Darie, the former. He was in the Senate, and then, of course, is spending the rest of his time now in the correctional center. So once again, it's not David Jang who was convicted. We apologize for that. But please, I return to you to continue.
On the issue of tolerance of corruption, incidentally, a study was conducted in 1968 by some foreign scholars. I remember Cleanard was among them. And they said that when a public officer in Nigeria gets appointed, his relatives expect him to take care of burial expenses, wedding expenditure. Whenever he goes home, he's expected to go home with gifts and all that. And those foreigners were of the view that such cultural practices encourage corruption. I don't know if that study is still current today or whether it affects us as public officers. But there is a way and method that public officers are increasingly getting involved in it that worries me. And that is public officers channeling government money into their own private accounts. Money meant to execute a project, you pay it into your private account, or you pay it into the account of maybe your underling in the office, and then through it, it is diverted. Last week, the ICPC got a deputy director in, I think, Federal Ministry of Water Resources convicted for doing that. I'm saying this so that others will know that it's wrong and the law may catch up with them. But our value system, we need to continuously interrogate them. Some have said that our culture of gift giving encourages corruption. But my understanding of gift giving in my own community is that if you are giving a gift, you give it in the open. And you don't give it secretly. You don't buy a Prado Jeep and you say it's a gift, or you pay 30,000 naira into the account of a person and you say it's a gift, or 30 million naira allegedly into the account of a public officer who is in the business of judging, and you call it a gift. So those manifestations are, I think, are part of where we are now.
But is it easier said than done?
No, yes.
I mean, because you're talking about gifts being in the open. Let's face it, culturally, you want to give me a gift, why advertise it?
What I'm saying is that what the Constitution allows.
No, we're talking about cultural practices.
Yeah. The Constitution allows customary gifts. And my own definition of customary gift, the type allowed by the Constitution, is a token. A token that is usually given to cement relationships. It is not meant to buy your conscience or to make you do the wrong thing.
So I don't know. I think we'll have a conversation around this at some point. How we now have the transformation, as it were, of aspects of our cultural values. Because in the past, yes, if you gave gifts, you didn't buy the conscience of the receiver of the gift. If they needed to dispense justice, they would dispense justice. But here we are. It's okay. Let's do it this way, and then everything will be settled. Unfortunately, the dust never settles on corruption.
It never does.
Yeah, Juma, we understand that Professor Sage is back. Yes. Via Zoom. Prof, I don't know how much you've been able to follow our conversation, but let's just get to hear your thoughts, because we are on the closing stretch of this conversation. A number of issues are on the table. We dealt with judicial activism versus judicial restraint. We've also talked about the attitude of the bench to some of these cases, plus whether or not going to amend the Constitution or AJA shouldn't be kept aside, so that what happens that if a judge of a high court is near concluding a case, let's say a corruption case, rather than elevate that judge by pronouncement to the Court of Appeal, tarry a while, let him dispense with his case by delivering judgment, and then he goes upstairs. But some of course, Alpha Mosigwe and Onoja do not agree with that proposition. What are your thoughts on these issues?
I think that's a defeatist attitude. So this is the technicality and rigidity that I've listened to my colleagues there, and they were believing as if law, man was made for law, rather than law is made for man. What is the difficulty? A law is passed. If you are promoted, you have got at an advanced stage in a case. Instead of the case starting de novo because of your promotion, you are allowed to conclude it without losing your promotion. What is difficult about that? Why do Nigerians create difficulty where none exists? Oh, somebody will come from Supreme Court and sit down. Oh, somebody is the Supreme Court judge having a part head matter in the High Court? Let us not manufacture difficulty and make our whole legal system sterile and totally useless to the population. We should always ask ourselves, what is the justice of the case? That is what law is looking for, trying to create a climate in which man will live in the most benevolent and enjoyable and happy manner. That's what we should be asking for, not creating obstacles for ourselves and then trying to answer those obstacles when there is none. I don't see the difficulty. There's no reason why a promoted judge cannot conclude a case. Oh, what is he going to call himself? What is the relevance of that? What's he going to call himself? I mean, these are Lilliputian arguments as far as I'm concerned. Oh, what side do we crack an egg? Is it from the big side or from the narrow side? What's all that? Just do simple things that are correct. You go back to the court, you conclude your case. Yes, I am Justice Ishesage of the newly promoted to the Court of Appeal, concluding my case in the High Court. What's the difficulty about that? So there's a lot of sterility in our legal system because of the attitude of our lawyers. And this is carried on to the bench. And that's why we're having all these problems we're having now. So all these arguments are just waste of time, totally irrelevant to the issue. Pure technicality and technicality and technicality again. That's what is killing us in this country. And I suppose it is these lawyers who are so technical and dry in the arguments that go to the courts, and then that's the end. That's why we're having these problems.
Thank you so much. We'll now go to Kaduna, where Yunus Ustaz Usman is waiting. Is the judicial system slowing the anti-corruption trial? Your closing thoughts.
It is the anti-corruption agencies that are slowing down the judicial trial of their own cases and not the judiciary. Let me tell you, in my almost 40 years in private practice, I've never come to court where when the lawyers to both sides are ready, the judge will say is not ready. No. Let us accept blame where the blame comes from us. It is the agencies, the prosecution agencies or the defense lawyers, not the judiciary. Please.
Onoja, your closing thoughts.
Okay. Like I said at the beginning, all parties have a role to play. Investigators, prosecutors, the courts. Defense counsel should always remember that the court system is where they make a living. And if people lose confidence in the court system because they see that ultimately they may not get the kind of justice that they want, there'll be less money and less respect for them. So both defense counsel, prosecutors, and judges, they are all they are role actors in the judicial system. So I think if we all work together and look at the policy effect of decisions that we make and not our own stomach all the time, I think we'll make progress. Thank you.
Afabo Sigwe, very briefly, does the anti-corruption fight suffer from political interference?
Obviously, yes.
And if so, how do we obviate it?
It does, it does. There are certain investigations that and prosecutions that you cannot help but conclude that are a product of political interference. And there are some cases that you see shouldn't be in court and are in court. Our investigative and prosecutorial agencies sometimes fall all over themselves to please those in positions of authority. And that's why you see a number of cases called terrorism, cybercrime, because people criticize governors especially. Cross River, Waibom, Kaduna. And so when you look at such things, you know that there's a lot of political interference. And because some of these persons are appointed by politicians and they want to hold their office, they feel that they need to please take certain actions, take certain steps to please people in positions of authority. And when you also look at some cases that are discontinued, you cannot but come to the conclusion that there's a lot of political interference. I mean, I don't need to mention names, but the facts are out there.
But Professor Sage, can we get your closing thoughts on this? Either with political interference, how do we obviate that? Because politics is pretty heavy, and it's been heavy in our polity for a while.
Briefly.
Repeat it. I didn't hear at all. Could you repeat, please?
I'm saying that let's get your closing thoughts on this conversation, and in particular, how do we mitigate political interference in the anti-corruption fight, particularly in the judicial system?
Okay. First, my belief is that when a judge is hearing a case, he should simply ask himself, where does the justice of this case lie? You see, the ordinary man, the common man, has a sense of justice. And that what you and I understand as justice should be what the court should in fact apply. That is why you find that in America, particularly, only juries, both either grand at the primary level and ordinary jury at the trial level, determine who is guilty, because it is assumed that it is the ordinary man who knows, who has a sense of what is just. And I think our judges should tune themselves, because we don't have juries here, should take that, assume that state of mind and ask themselves, where does the justice lie? Our law is so flexible that you can always achieve justice by applying law the way it has been made flexible by the common law. If you listen to our judges in the 90s, 80s and 90s, where you had a Shaw and all the others, Oputa, and that group, Caribbean White, all of them, you think you are in a different world from what we are in now. Namani, all those things. You won't believe that we're in the same country. So ask, what is the justice of the case? Go for that. The common law provides you the tools to be able to weave yourself and bring law and justice together, provided you determine what justice is first. That is what is lacking.
Okay. Professor Ishe Sage, Senior Advocate of Nigeria and Chairman of the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption, PACAC, would like to appreciate you for being part of our conversation this morning. Even though you were off and on, but you were able to follow the trend and also make your contribution. We appreciate you for being with us. From Kaduna, we're joined by another Senior Advocate, Yunus Ustaz Usman. Senior Advocate, thank you very much for your contribution this morning. Here in our studios, Mazi Afam Osigwe, former Secretary General of the Nigerian Bar Association. Always a delight having you on the program. And Dr. Esa Anoja, Chief of Staff to the Chairman of ICPC, we thank you for being with us. Thank you. Okay, so that does it for Good Morning Nigeria today. As always, we appreciate your being with us. Stay safe and be well. We're back tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Jomo Yusuf. Do have a great day. And remember to adhere to safety protocols and avoid mass gatherings.